Happy hauntings, horror fans, and welcome to this week's episode of Megan's Murder Movies. I'm actually not going to tell you what movie it is we're going to do. I'm actually going to give you guys the summary and see if anyone can guess what it is. It is April Fool's Day, so this is not what people would typically think of as a horror movie. So let's get into the summary and see if any of you can figure out what movie it is before I jump into the cast. So an old group of friends reunite and go on vacation to a popular vacation destination. However, they soon hear that people who have been visiting the island are leaving with different personalities. The group of friends decide to investigate, and horror ensues. One of the friends is even kidnapped and set to be sacrificed to the movie's villain. The group of friends have to work together and try and save their friend and the other people on the island. Does anyone know what the film is? It was directed by Raja Gosnell, and the screenplay was done by James Gunn, the same person who's done Guardians of the Galaxy. Anyone? Okay, so the movie we are doing this week is the live-action Scooby-Doo movie. Let's jump into the cast. This I thought would be a really fun one for April Fools, since a lot of the actors have also starred in horror movies, but it doesn't technically count as a horror movie since it's a family film, but I thought this would be a fun little break from all of the terrible things that we talk about every single week. So let's jump into the cast. The first person we're going to talk about is Freddie Prinze Jr., who plays Fred Jones. He's an American actor, writer, and producer, and he starred in I Know What You Did Last Summer and I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, which are two classic cult horror movies. She's All That, Summer Catch, of course, Scooby-Doo, and the sequel Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed. He also had a reoccurring role in Friends, Boston Legal, Freddy, and 24. And then he also did a voice for the Star Wars Rebels show on Disney XD. He voiced Kanan Jarrus. Next, we'll talk about Sarah Michelle Gellar, who is one of my favorite actresses, and she plays Daphne Blake. She's an American actress, producer, and entrepreneur, and she actually started acting at the age of 4 when she was kind of spotted in New York City, and she made her acting debut in the television film An Invasion of Privacy in 1983. She was also in Swan's Crossing and All My Children. One of her most notable roles is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is one of my favorite shows. I actually didn't watch it until I was in college, but it's one of my favorite kind of go-tos, put on in the background while I'm working or cleaning or doing whatever. Just really love Sarah Michelle Gellar. And she was also in I Know What You Did Last Summer. She's in Scream 2, which I can't wait to talk about. Cruel Intentions, which is a classic. Of course, Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Doo 2. The Grudge, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then she's also appeared in a bunch of independent films, such as Southland Tales, The Air I Breathe, and Veronica Decides to Die. Next, we will talk about one of my absolute favorites, Matthew Lillard. Of course, we talked about him a lot in Scream, and in this movie, he plays Norval, aka Shaggy Rogers, and he's an American actor, comedian, director, and producer. We'll talk about him a little bit since we've talked about him a lot in Scream, but he was in Hackers, LCL Punk, She's All That, Summer Catch, of course, Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Doo 2. He was also in Without a Paddle, The Groomsman, Home Run Showdown, Return to Nim's Island, Twin Peaks: The Return, and he most recently has starred in the series Good Girls. Then we have Linda Cardinelli, who plays Velma Dinkley. She's an American actress, and she's known for her leading role in Freaks and Geeks, and she was also in ER and the drama thriller Bloodline. She was also very recently in a tragic comedy called Dead to Me, which I hear is really good. I've not watched it yet. She was also in Mad Men, Regular Show, Gravity Falls, of course, the Scooby-Doo movies, Legally Blonde, Brokeback Mountain, Grandma's Boy, Kill the Irishman, Avengers Age of Ultron, Avengers Endgame, Daddy's Home 2, and she was also in the horror movie The Curse of La Llorona. So a lot of these actors have been in horror movies, and so I figured, this movie deserves to be in the Megan's Murder movies. And of course, I just love it. Scooby-Doo was one of my favorites growing up, so I had to do the live action and give love to all of these actors and actresses in the film. Next, we'll move on to Rowan Atkinson, who plays Emil Mondavarius. He's an English actor, comedian, and writer, best known for sitcoms Blackadder, and Mr. Bean, and the film series Johnny English. He first came to prominence in the BBC sketch comedy Not the 9 O'Clock News, which he received a BAFTA for. He was also in The Secret Policeman's Ball, James Bond film Never Say Never Again, For Weddings and a Funeral. He voiced Zazu in The Lion King. He was in Love Actually, A Thin Blue Line. He's been on the West End. He was in Oliver and The Observer. Just super great career. You'll definitely recognize him. I think probably his most notable role is, in the Bean movies as Mr. Bean. But he's great in this. Plays like a really awkward, weird character. But love it. Next, we'll talk about Elsa Fisher, who plays Mary Jane, and she's an Australian actress and author born to Scottish parents. She moved to Australia at age 6 and began appearing in television commercials. Fisher came to prominence of her portrayal of Shannon Reed on the Australian soap opera Home and Away. She's been in Wedding Crashers, Confessions of a Shopaholic, The Great Gatsby, Now You See Me. She was also in I Heart Huckabees, The Lookout, Definitely Maybe, Burke and Hare, Bachelorette, Grimsby, Nocturnal Animals, Keeping Up with the Joneses, Horton Hears a Who, Rango, Rise of the Guardians, and she's also been on Arrested Development. A super lovely actress, been in tons of things. I'm sure you'll recognize her. And then Neil Fanning was the voice of Scooby-Doo. He's an Australian voice artist, stuntman, actor, and safety supervisor. Pretty much does everything, and his best-known roles are actually the leading voice of Scooby-Doo in both the first one and then Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. And his entertainment career has spanned over 30 years, and he's performed live shows in over 50 movie, television, and commercial roles. So, absolutely talented person and brings to life a lot of nostalgia and fan-favorite character that is Scooby-Doo. So now that we've talked about the cast, we know what movie we're getting into. Let's talk about some fun facts. There's actually some really cool fun facts for this film, and they were really interesting to kind of read about. So the first live-action movie for Scooby-Doo initially went into development in 1994. They've wanted to do this for a long time. Producer Charles Roven began developing it in 1994, like I said. Many casts and scripts were considered, but it was only in October 2001 that Warner Bros. Pictures gave the film the green light and hired Raja Gosnell to direct it. So there was all of these things in the works behind the scenes. They wanted to make it for a long time, and they finally decided in 2001, yep, we're going to do this. Next fun fact is that Jim Carrey was originally signed on to play Shaggy. So in 1996, Jim Carrey was attached to play the iconic role of Shaggy Rogers. Following production delays, he left the project, and Mike Myers was in the running before Matthew Lillard was cast. Jim would have been great, and I think that he could have pulled off Shaggy, but I just love Matthew Lillard so much, and the fact that he plays so many lovely characters that I grew up watching, and then also that are in some of my favorite films of all time. Him playing Stu Macher in Scream is one of my favorite things about Scream, is the role of Stu and how Matthew portrays it. And so the fact that he's also Shaggy, Matthew Lillard is just a big star in the movies that I've watched. And yeah, just really great to see him in this. In terms of who was going to play Daphne, I guess they had Jennifer Aniston, Jennifer Love Hewitt, and Elsa Fisher were all considered to play her. Before Sarah Michelle Gellar became Daphne as we know her, those three were kind of all up for the part, but Raja eventually decided that Sarah was the best fit, but he loved Elsa so much that he cast her as Mary Jane. And then for Velma, Alyssa Milano, Carla Gringo, and Christina Ricci were all considered to play Velma. Linda Cardellini wasn't the only actress shortlisted to play Velma, but beat out Alyssa Milano, Carla Gringo, and Christina Ricci during the audition process. They just felt like she would be the best fit. And the movie was actually shot in Queensland, Australia, on a budget of $84 million. And the movie was shot in an actual theme park. While Spooky Island doesn't actually exist, Scooby-Doo did use a real theme park as the set. All of the Spooky Island scenes were filmed in Warner Bros. Movie World theme parks in Queensland, Australia. And they actually have, we'll talk about it, but there's this amazing castle ride that they actually have at the Warner Bros. Studios in Australia, and I want to go so bad and ride it because watching this as a kid, I really want to go see like all of the stuff that they have at this theme park that like was also used in the movie, like the Spooky Island roller coaster. They actually constructed a Spooky Island roller coaster inspired by the castle in the film, which is kind of what I was talking. Like it was revamped in 2018, but it still stays true to the movie. So like all of the, you know, how the castle's laid out and the little carts that you sit in. And I want to go so bad. If I ever go to Australia, that's one of the first places I'm going. Another really cool fact that I really wish that we would have gotten out of the film is that Velma was written as gay in the original script. She was part of the LGBTQ plus community. A lot of people, like, canon is that, you know, Velma and Daphne maybe were a thing, and that's what would have happened in this movie. Not, like, officially a thing, but they definitely would have maybe had, like, a situationship going on, which I think would have been amazing to see. And those two actresses are just, like, beautiful. And I think it would have been great representation to have that when it was in 2000, whenever this movie came out. I think it would have been great representation to have, but the studio wanted it cut. But James Gunn was like, nope, our Velma is going to be lesbian. Like, he was set for that. He tried. He wrote her explicitly gay in the script, but the studio was like, nope, this needs to be taken out. It needs to not be so obvious. I guess they just kept kind of watering it down, he said, and it became really ambiguous. And then nothing in the released version that they kept to even have it slightly be ambiguous was pushed through. It was all kind of left on the cutting room floor. Like, they filmed scenes that would have been a little bit ambiguous, and then of course in the sequel they give Velma a boyfriend, and James Gunn's like, I think he's as heartbroken about it as we are. But Velma and Daphne were actually supposed to kiss. I guess Sarah Michelle Gellar revealed in Sci-Fi Wire that Velma and Daphne had a kissing scene that was cut from the film. It wasn't for fun. It was kind of when the souls were, the like protoplasms were going back and forth between the bodies. Velma and Daphne kissed because they realized that could get their souls back into proper alignment. And I guess in 2020, James Gunn tweeted, the movie was originally meant to be PG-13 and was cut down to PG after like 3 parents complained at the screen testings in Sacramento, and the studio decided to go for a more family-friendly route. So language and jokes and sexual situations were removed, including the kiss between Daphne and Velma, which I think is so sad, because I think of all of the like beautiful art that I've seen and the beautiful like Tumblr posts and like TikTok, it's very popular to have like cute little Velma Daphne couples, and I think that would be beautiful. Other things that were cut from the film, Shaggy was supposed to be a stoner. I think that's canon for most people who watch it. In keeping with the film originally being more adult, Shaggy was supposed to be a stoner, and while it's not mentioned in the live-action movie, there are many references that allude to that. For example, Shaggy saying he's toasted in one scene, and his love interest in Mary Jane, when she's like, oh, my name's Mary Jane, he's like, that is like my favorite name, and you're like, I bet it is, Shaggy. I bet it is. Sarah Michelle Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr. are actually a couple in real life, so Daphne and Fred are married and seem to have a lovely relationship. They actually met while filming I Know What You Did last summer and started dating in 2000. They got engaged in 2001 and married in 2002, and they've been together ever since. They have 2 children, and neither of them actually realized that the other was auditioning for Scooby-Doo when they were first sent the scripts. And Freddie Prinze Jr. wasn't sure he really wanted to play Fred initially, but Sarah Michelle Gellar actually talked him into it when they both realized that they had been sent scripts for it and that they were, kind of in the running for it. She persuaded him to take the part, and Raja Gosnell was also kind of hoping that Fred and Daphne were played by a real-life couple because he kind of liked that, I think the initial canon and kind of the What's New Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Doo Where Are You, like the animated shows, where Daphne and Fred are kind of more of a couple. I still like the idea of Daphne and Velma, though. Freddie Prinze Jr. had to shave his hair after filming the first movie because the bleach that they used ruined his hair. So he basically just had to shave it and start over. And Sarah Michelle Gellar had to wear a wig the whole time as Daphne because she was filming Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and so they couldn't dye her hair red because she's not a redhead in Buffy, and so they just opted to use a red wig when they did this. Neil Fanning, like we talked about a little bit ago, voiced Scooby-Doo, and he was actually on set every day. Didn't really need to be, but came to set every day so that they could build rapport with, the cast and the crew. And I guess him and Matthew Lillard really became close because they, a lot of their talking roles were with each other. And so I think that's really awesome that he kind of went that extra mile, even though he could have been like, I'm just going to go to the studio and record my bits and like do my own thing. But he made sure to be there so that it would all be comfortable and hopefully feel more connected, which I think is cool. So at the beginning of the movie, there's this airport scene where the gang kind of reunites, which we'll talk about in the scene by scene, obviously. But they kind of explain exactly what they've been up to since they split up. And they kind of are supposed to have all of these flashbacks to how true these statements actually were. So, like, Fred says that he's a best-selling author, but I guess in the flashbacks, like, the books really didn't sell as well as Fred's making it out to be. Velma says that she works for NASA, but I guess she's actually in therapy. And Daphne claims that she's a black belt and has transformed her body into a dangerous weapon, but she really hasn't. And Roger Gosnell decided to cut them due to time, but I guess they're deleted scenes now on the DVD. Even though the movie takes place on Spooky Island, the main villain of this was supposed to be the Luna Ghost, which we see at the very beginning of the movie. That's kind of like the opening sequence is the gang, solving the mystery of the Luna Ghost. They catch the Luna Ghost in the opening, and it was supposed to be kind of the mastermind behind Spooky Island 2, but in the end, James Gunn decided that, spoiler alert, Scrappy-Doo was a better fit to be the main villain for Spooky Island, which I think is a kind of a cool little plot twist, because you definitely don't expect, even though they talk about Scrappy, you really don't expect for Scrappy to ever become the bad guy based on all the animated ones, so I thought that was kind of interesting. So Matthew Lillard has voiced Shaggy in almost every cartoon since the film. Sadly, though, he wasn't approached to play Shaggy in the 2020 film Scoob, which I think is such a bummer because it was animated and he could have very easily done that, and he loves it so much. And yeah, like, he loved playing the part. He's basically a legacy character that he's been doing for 30 years. Like, that's a character that he spent 30 years portraying, is Shaggy. But yeah, it's a bummer that they decided to go with someone different for Scoob. I've not seen it yet. I hear it's really cute. I need to watch it. But yeah, like, super bummed that Matthew Lillard didn't get his chance to continue on his Shaggy role because he's so good. And I guess a third film was actually approved, but it was later canceled. During filming the second movie, Warner Bros. Pictures approved production for a third film. However, it really never led to anything. In 2020, James Gunn says, I made a deal to write and direct number 3 back in 2004, but the second one, although it did well, didn't do well enough to warrant a third, so the movie was never made. For the plot, he said that Mystery Inc. gang are hired by a town in Scotland who complain that they're being plagued by monsters, and we discover throughout the film the monsters are actually the victims, and Scooby and Shaggy have to come to terms with their own prejudices and narrow belief systems. Which sounds very interesting, and I would have loved to see the gang in Scotland because I love a good Scottish accent, and I would have loved to see the food that Shaggy and Scooby eat while they're in Scotland, and that one would have probably been very intense, it sounds like, especially if James Gunn was going to write and direct it. He probably would have gone wild with his ideas, which is great, and I would have loved to see it. But yeah, super bummed that we missed out on the gang going to Scotland. Bummer deal. Now that we've met the cast, we know what movie we're talking about, and we've got some fun facts. Let's get into the scene-by-scene breakdown. I'm so excited to talk about this one. It was a joy to rewatch again this weekend, and was just kind of the nice, relaxing nostalgia that my brain kind of needed. Even though I was, like, taking notes while I was doing it, I felt like I didn't really need to because I've seen this movie. I think we have it on DVD. Like, I'm 99% sure it's on my bookshelf. It was on Netflix, so I just threw it on. Rather than having to update my Xbox to watch it on DVD. But yeah, I'm super, super excited to get into it. So like we talked about, We start with our gang at the Wallow Toy Factory, the case of the Luna Ghost. Daphne's been captured. Right off the bat, we see the Luna Ghost has got her, like, football carry almost, and she's just stuck. We see Velma and Fred talking to each other kind of over walkie-talkies about the plan and how they're going to catch the Luna Ghost. Of course, Scooby and Shaggy are a large part of this plan, and they mess it up in classic fashion. I love the two of them, but they are not the most reliable in terms of sticking to the plan. They're reliable and, well, maybe not reliable. They're effective in what ends up happening, but I think that's more luck or coincidence than them actually trying. So, the ghost catches them off guard, tries to light Scooby's tail on fire, and there's actually this really great shot of the Luna Ghost. The face is kind of spooky. Like, the Luna Ghost is this kind of jester, like, Joker character that you'd see on, like, a pack of playing cards. But there's this great close-up where the Luna Ghost has a match in front of its face because it's going to, like, kind of breathe and the fire's going to go and try to light Scooby on fire. And you see all of these teeth. It's kind of really scary. You only see it for about a second, but when you realize that the mask has teeth, it makes it a lot scarier. Like, 10 out of 10. They probably could have done this in more of a horror film. I'd love that to happen. Who's going to make that? Who would be cast? I kind of think same cast. Like, I'd love to see same cast as Scooby-Doo, but I want, like, horror. Like, I want it spooky. I want the jump scares. Yeah. Oh, who's going to make a new live-action Scooby-Doo? And if Sarah Michelle Gellar is not available, I will play Daphne. And if Linda's not available, I will play Velma. I will do whatever. I will be a dead body. I would just love to be a part of it. I just like to be here. Anyway, Shaggy has that classic, moment where he's talking to Scooby, and he's like, you need to calm down. We're trying to do stuff. We're doing the plan, and Scooby's freaking out, and Shaggy does the, oh my god, the ghost is right behind me, isn't it? And they both freak out. Super classic. It sticks to, like, the writing of the animated cartoons super well, and kind of how the characters play off of each other, and, like, the language that's used, and it's just very soothing. It's very familiar, and so it feels great. I love nostalgia. Awesome. And this movie actually has pretty good CGI for being 20 years old. Like, Scooby-Doo does not look that bad as a CGI dog. And, like, again, props to Matthew Lillard for having to pretty much act opposite Scooby the entire time, but nothing is there. Like, he doesn't actually get that, like, back and forth to, like, that it's a CGI dog. What a guy. I just love Matthew Lillard so much. I think this movie holds up, definitely, but back to the film itself, that's basically where the plan backfires, is when the Luna Ghost gets the jump on Shaggy and Scooby. Fred doesn't spray the ghost like he's supposed to. He ends up falling down because Scooby and Shaggy spill, like, this oil or whatever on the floor. He sprays up kind of toward the ceiling, sprays Velma. She falls off this, like, railing thing, gets tangled up in chains, and is now hanging upside down. Like, it's just a whole mess. While Scooby and Shaggy are running away, they have this really great stunt scene, and the ghost ends up being taken down. They, like, knock the ghost into this, like, wall of containers at the toy factory, and Daphne is saved. And next we see the van come skidding through this wall, like, busting through this wall in this factory. And Pamela Anderson is driving. And as a kid, I don't think I quite realized, like, holy shit, that's Pamela Anderson. But when I was older and I knew, like, who she was, I was like, wait, what has happened? Like, why is she here? It was a very interesting cameo, I feel like. But she's driving. I guess she owns the factory because she was making her own Pamela Anderson action figure. So that's what's in all these little containers that the Luna Ghost gets knocked into. Anyway. So, like, the van comes in, and then there's these, like, police cars, and then there's news vans, and then there's all of these Mystery Inc. fans on foot. Like, some people dressed as Fred, some dressed as Velma, like, wanting autographs and pictures, and, like, all these things. It's like, where did all of you people come from? Like, it was wild. Anyway, that's not the point. Fred is being interviewed by the news, and he's like, oh, we catch these people because of teamwork, and I always have a plan. And you can just see Velma kind of deflate a little bit, because that was her plan. Like, catching the ghost, even though it didn't go according to plan, she set everything up. It was all her idea. So Fred's talking and basically taking credit for everything, which really not cool. Like, not okay. And you just see Velma be like, she's just sad. She's bummed. They do the classic unmasking of the ghost, and it's actually the janitor from the factory. Everyone is shocked except Fred and Velma. He says that he did it because Pam refused to go out with him. And you're like, okay, creepy guy, whatever. Velma helps break down the costume that the Luna Ghost uses, and we get the classic, I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids and your dumb dog. Which, again, classic line. We love that that was thrown in there. After kind of everything wraps up, the gang starts heading back to the van, but they start arguing. Daphne's mad that they left her for so long. She's like, that guy had me for an hour and a half. Like, what took you guys so long? Velma's mad that Fred is taking credit for her plan again. Daphne takes Velma's glasses, and Shaggy's trying to make everyone feel better. He's like, guys, we're a team. Like, it's not one person's better than the other. Like, we all make this big banana split. And so he tells everyone what, like, ingredients they are for this nasty banana split that he's coming up with in his head. But it's classic Shaggy fashion. He's trying to give everyone a pep talk and just tell everyone that he appreciates them and that without one of them, it wouldn't be the same. But sadly, that backfires, and Velma says that she's quitting. She's like, you really put it into perspective for me, and I quit. And Shaggy is, like, super confused, because he's like, well, that was not my plan. And then Daphne and Fred also quit. They all leave, and Shaggy and Scooby are stuck with the van and broken hearts. Shaggy tells Scooby that friends don't quit, because Scooby goes, do I quit? And Shaggy goes, no, Scoob, friends don't quit. And they drive off together. Next we see it's 2 years later. Shaggy and Scooby are kind of living the life. They're living in the van, next to the beach, eating a bunch of food, hanging out, and we hear a knock at the van door. They're trying to leave quickly, but they actually bump into this guy on their way out of it. It's like, I don't know where you guys thought you were escaping to. Like, a van is only so big to be able to sneak out of, you know what I mean? To, like, get away from this person that's knocking on your van door. And he says that he was sent by his owner, or not his owner, wow, sent by his boss, Emil Montevarius, to invite them to come to Spooky Island to solve a mystery. Shaggy's like, nah, we don't go to places with spooky, haunted, forbidden, or creepy in the name. Like, not our thing, we're not detectives anymore, no thank you. And the guy's like, free airfare, free room and board, like $10,000. And Shaggy's like, nah, like, we're okay. And then the guy's like, what about all you can eat? And of course, that's going to get Shaggy and Scooby every single time. Next, we're at the airport, and we see Fred and Velma bump into each other. They catch up, and that's kind of what we're talking about in the fun facts. Fred says that he wrote a book, and it's doing really well. Velma says that she's working at NASA, and they get to, like, their gate, where their flight's going to leave from, and Daphne's at the gate, and she sees them, and she's like, I'm not talking to either of you, but then she immediately turns around and says, what are you doing here? And Velma's like, we all must have received the same invitation to go to Spooky Island. Daphne lets them know that she's a black belt now, and Fred and Velma just laugh at her, which I think is kind of crappy, especially because it's like, Fred, you two were supposed to be, like, kind of a thing, so why are you being so rude to your girl? I don't know. That's just me, though. Fred is kind of a dummy in this one. Kind of, I don't want to say a meathead, but he's got some rocks where parts of his brain should be in this one, I feel like. Shaggy and Scooby show up, but Scooby's dressed like an old woman because they don't allow big dogs on the plane. I'm guessing Shaggy didn't want to put him under the plane, which is valid. I don't think Scooby would handle that very well, so he's all dressed up as an old woman. Everyone realizes that it's actually Scooby, or like Velma and Daphne realize that it's Scooby, but Fred doesn't. Kind of again back to the maybe some rocks where he should have some brains. They're all really reluctant to go because they don't want to have to work together. They, kind of want to outshine each other, but Shaggy convinces them to all go. But they're kind of, like I said, they're like, we're not going to hang out together. I'm going to solve this mystery first, blah, blah, blah. Scooby and Shaggy are sitting next to each other, and this is when we meet Mary Jane. Fred and Velma are next to each other, and Daphne's next to this guy, and you can see she's trying to read this magazine, and he's talking to her, and she just has her hand up in his face, like, please leave me alone, which is very valid, because I don't know about you, but when I'm on a plane, I don't want anyone to talk to me. It's like, you can see I have my headphones in. Don't ask me where I'm going. Don't ask me what I'm doing. Just let me sit with my headphones and not be present for 2 hours, please, or however long my flight's supposed to be. Shaggy wants to talk with Mary Jane, and apparently she's allergic to dogs, so she keeps sneezing, and then she's going to leave. And then Shaggy's like, no, Scoob, maybe you should go see Velma, like, because he wants to talk to Mary Jane. So Scooby gets up, he goes to the back of the plane to see them, and Mary Jane pulls out a bag of Scooby snacks. And Shaggy's like, are you eating Scooby snacks? And she's like, yeah, I know that they're supposed to be for dogs, but they're vegan, and they're really good, and so I eat them. And so they have a little bonding moment over that, which is cute, I guess. And then it's really weird because, so Scooby, as he sits down next to Fred, so it's like Velma's at the window, Fred's in the middle, and then Scooby's like in the aisle seat. He walks past this cat, and there's just this random cat, and I'm like, part of me wants to be like, well, who's taking a cat to an island on vacation, like an amusement park? And then I'm like, well, who takes a dog? But then Scooby's not like a normal dog, but I don't think this is like a detective cat. But I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it is a detective cat. But I don't think I would bring, even if I could, I don't think I'd bring my cat to an amusement park island vacation thing. So this cat starts hissing at Scooby because it's a dog. Scooby starts barking at it, and Fred flicks Scooby on the nose. Scooby turns around and just socks Fred right in the face, which is just hilarious. He chases the cat. And next thing we know, the gang is landing on the island, or they're like getting off of a boat. And so I wonder, I'm like, where does the plane take you? Because it doesn't look like there's an airport. So I'm wondering if, like, I don't know. I want to know, like, how do you get to Spooky Island? Because clearly you have to get on a boat and go there. But the airplane was an advert, like it was a Spooky Island airplane. And so I'm like, where, like, is the hub in Florida? And then the island's like off the coast of Florida, so then you take like a little ship, or like how do you get to Spooky Island? Where's Spooky Island? I don't know. Australia, maybe? But you could fly into Australia. You don't need to. I don't know. I wanna go to Spooky Island. That's on my bucket list, and it doesn't even exist, so that's disappointing. Who wants to buy an island with me and open a spooky amusement park? Please message me on social media. M Murder Movies. That's M as in Massacre, Murder Movies. Let's open our own Spooky Island. We can have Matthew Lillard come for the opening. He would do that. I know he would. Be like, hey, Matthew, come hang out. And he'd be like, bet, see you there. That's exactly how the conversation would go, word for word. I can feel it in my bones. Anyway, back to the movie. So we see the amusement park, Spooky Island, and it looks so cool. They get off the boat, they're on the pier, they meet the owner, Emil Montevarius, and he's like an odd guy. He's not scary, he's just odd. They talk about the island, and he tells the gang that people are leaving the island, not themselves. He says someone is casting a spell on his visitors. And we see a girl who's greeted by an old friend, and she literally picks him up and throws him. Everyone is totally shocked by what they just saw. The owner is like, these are the people that I care about so much because they choose to spend their time here, and I hate that this is happening to them. And the gang kind of decide that they all want to individually solve it first. Like, they're not at the moment working as a team. They're like, I'm going to solve the mystery before any of you guys, and blah, blah, blah. And so they all kind of break off, and we cut to nighttime. Velma is interviewing people and shows up at this like voodoo type event at the island. So think of like the Disneyland parade that they have at like specific times throughout the day. And this is like this voodoo thing. And so this guy leading it says that the island used to be home to ancient creatures who lived on the island before they were forced out by man. And Velma ruins this whole event, basically, because the guy comes up and he's like, are you scared? And blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I would be if it weren't for the projectors. And so she points out, like, all of these projectors, because at one point he stands in front of this, like, fire pit and, you know, says the line, and then, like, this giant monster face is seen in the fire, and he's telling all the people that they, you know, that he's going to get them and he's after them. And she's like, yeah, but there's projectors over there and right there. And then next we see the absolute coolest disco ball that I have ever seen in my entire life. It's this giant skull head with these spikes, and I want one for my bedroom, or like if I ever win the lottery and buy a huge mansion, that's going to be the big chandelier that you see when you first walk into my house. This is just this giant skull disco ball. It's absolutely amazing. But anyway, Shaggy and Scooby are kind of in this like bar food area. And Scooby gets a call on the phone. The bartender's like, I have a phone call for a Mr. Dew. And so Scooby goes and takes the phone, and it's this, it kind of reminds me of Scream a little bit, because it's this ghost, it's this spooky voice is like, I've got hamburgers for you. You just need to walk into like the dark part of the forest so that you can get them where no one will see you. And of course it's food, so Scooby's like, well, okay, sounds good. I'll on my way. And you're like, Scooby, just stop. Shaggy's hanging out with Mary Jane, and he wins her this like stuffed head from a claw machine, says that that's one of his like special talents. He learned how to be good at those machines. Daphne finds this guy on the island, kind of like on the beach. He's got this little shack hut thing, and he says that he was in the middle of doing a voodoo ritual, and he tells her not to go to the spooky island castle. So what does she do? She immediately decides to go up to the castle. Scooby's in the woods looking for this bag of hamburgers, and the monsters, like, they're basically, almost think of like a hairless cat, but 10 feet tall, really lanky, arms and legs, and is bipedal, so walks on two legs. After Scooby tries to chase him, he gets rid of them, runs out of the woods, and basically tackles Shaggy. And he's like, there's a monster, and blah, blah, blah. But then this, like, basically mascot comes out of the woods. It's this guy dressed in this, like, giant bunny costume. And so Shaggy's like, seriously, like, you need to chill out, knock it off, whatever. Daphne finds Scooby and Shaggy and brings them to the castle with her, and she has to offer them Scooby snacks so they'll help. Again, classic Scooby-Doo. They're both like, we're absolutely not. And she's like, well, would you do it for a Scooby snack? And then they're like, well, I guess, maybe. So good play on Daphne's part, and also kind of sweet that she has them with her. The idea that she packed Scooby snacks with her is pretty slim, in my opinion, so she must have had to try and scramble to find them, or she's had them in her bag since they broke up, and she's had Scooby snacks for the last 2 years because she's just used to carrying them. So they go inside, and Fred shows up and kind of scares them a little bit. He opens this door, and they all kind of jump, and then Velma's there already, and she scares Daphne. She, like, moves this giant Grim Reaper looking figure and, like, puts the arm out and sets it on Daphne's shoulder and scares her. They do the classic, let's split up and look for clues. Velma gets upset because Fred's like, Daphne and I will go here, Scooby and Shaggy, and Velma's like, of course, like, I never get a teammate. I'm always picked last, and I never get to go with someone. It's always just me by myself. And so Fred's like, okay, fine, you and I will go do stuff. Daphne, you go by yourself. Shaggy and Scooby, do whatever it is the two of you do. Everyone's looking around, and Fred and Velma kind of have, like, a little heart-to-heart. Velma's saying she understands why she's picked last, because people like Fred only care about, conventionally attractive women. And Fred has this great line where he says, no, dorky chicks like you turn me on as well. And it's like, he was trying to give her a compliment, but calling her dorky, not really the way to do it. Intellectual would have been a great word, Fred. Maybe a little bit of a big word for Fred. But they kind of have this little heart-to-heart, but at this moment, we see that someone is, in fact, watching them from inside the castle. And basically, the castle is not just like a regular castle. It's a ride. It used to be a ride for the theme park. And this person who's watching them starts the ride. And so Daphne ends up being caught on one of the, like, carts that you ride. It kind of, like, runs into her. And so she's stuck on the front of it, hanging on so that she doesn't basically get run over. Scooby and Shaggy are trapped on this wall in the ride, and Velma and Fred are running through basically these, like, pendulum giant swords, or whatever you want to call them. Fred almost gets, like, hit by one of them, and Velma throws this, like, book. They're, like, at the end of the hallway that they're in, or, like, section of the ride that they're in. There's a bookcase, and they can't get out, and so Velma's like, well, maybe one of these opens, like, a trap door, or a door that we can get out. And Fred's like, Velma, this is a ride, like, one of these isn't going to be like a secret passage book that, you'd see in, like, other Scooby-Doo, like a mansion or an actual house. He's like, this is a ride. So he's pulling books off and almost falls in front of one of the giant, like, axe things, whatever you want to call it. And Velma throws a book at him, and he catches it. And basically that is between him and the blade. And he goes flying back into this, like, one-sided window thing. And flips the switch, and the ride shuts off. And the operating room is set up kind of like a school. There's, like, a handful of desks, and Fred and Velma are really confused, and they find this video that they start watching. Scooby and Shaggy kind of find this, like, movie set thing, and if you pay attention, the the set and the video and what the video that Velma and Fred are watching is the same setup that Scooby and Shaggy find. So it's filmed at that location, if that makes sense. The video seems to be a brainwashing type thing, Velma thinks. She's like a very cult-like brainwashing type stuff. And Daphne finds this weird pyramid thing and takes it. She like is in this room and it's like on this, pedestal in the middle of the room. And so she goes up and touches it and there's like all this, writing on it. Think of like hieroglyphics. And so she takes it and then this cage starts to shut and she like jumps out just in time and takes the pyramid. Scooby and Shaggy have this like burping farting contest thing. And the fact that Matthew Lillard had to do all of this one-sided is just wild. He's so talented. Like, not the whole burping farting thing, but like, he's just such a good actor. And I love him as Scooby-Doo so much. And Daphne walks in, sadly, and almost passes out because of the disgusting smell. And the person watching them finally decides to hit the alarm, and the gang has to make a break for it. They all meet on their way out, and they have to hide from these like evil henchmen, basically. The gang's able to escape, and they seem to be working well together for now. Like, things seem to be going okay. They're back kind of in the groove of the normal Mystery Inc. stuff that they're used to. That second nature has kind of kicked in. They split up and look for more clues to do research. Velma's researching the pyramid. She thinks it's called the Damon-ritis. She starts talking with this guy at the bar. And Velma has flashbacks of the gang when things were really good, and at that time Scrappy-Doo was with them, and that's a very common character that we know from the Scooby-Doo series and the franchise in general. Is I think he's technically Scooby's nephew, is Scrappy. They kicked him out because he wanted to be the leader, and he was just a bit aggressive, and so they kicked him out, and Velma seems a bit drunk at this point. She's like giggling and laughing and definitely flirting with this guy, which is fine, but I still really would have liked to see her and Daphne have like a little situationship thing. Scooby's hanging out by this window and sees another monster that he saw in the woods, and he freaks out and like starts saying there's a monster, knocks people over, and Fred gives this big speech, and he's like, there's no such thing as monsters. Like, I don't know how many times I have to tell you. And at that moment, the monsters start breaking in and grabbing people one by one. One grabs Fred and knocks him out with his breath. They kind of like breathe this green breath into your face, knocks you out. So Fred's down. Velma loses her glasses in typical fashion, and a monster gets her too. Shaggy tries to save Mary Jane. And people are just being taken left and right. Daphne gets the Damon-ritis. Daphne, Scooby, and Shaggy are able to run away, and this like great song break, amazing song with that scene. They go crashing out a window as they're trying to make a run for it, and so now we have it's Mary Jane, Shaggy, Daphne, and Scooby are the four kind of working together trying to get out without being captured. Mary Jane tries to call the Coast Guard, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll be there. We've got someone in the vicinity. And we see, like, inside the Coast Guard tower, and the guy, they just laugh at her. Like, they don't, so are they in on it? Like, do they think it's a prank? Like, I don't understand. I think they're in on it because it's filmed very evil. So the four of them end up falling asleep on the beach, and they wake up in the morning, but everything seems normal. Like, people are up playing volleyball, and there's no monsters to be seen, and the hotel is put back together, even though there's, like, broken windows and, like, all of this stuff. And so it's like, what exactly happened? And so they go looking around, and Daphne is serenaded by this guy, and then, like, his eyes start glowing green, and so she, like, gets out of there. But he realizes that she's not a monster, and so then, like, Daphne becomes a target. Scooby and Shaggy actually find Fred, and they're like, oh, this is great. Like, where'd you go? Is everything okay? And Fred doesn't recognize them, and he's talking really weird. And then everyone kind of in that vicinity tries to attack Shaggy and Scooby. And Fred says, get the dog. So they're clearly after Scooby, but we're not sure why we're after Scooby, like, or what's going on. Scooby and Shaggy get away, and they kind of lock themselves in this shed area, and they find some ATVs in the shed, and they're able to get away on those, but people are still chasing them. They find Mary Jane, and they're able to save her, and Scooby sees Mary Jane's face change, and he realizes that she's also a monster. So this probably happened, like, either she's been acting the whole time, and she's been a monster for a lot longer than we think, or it happened in this brief period when they all kind of split up after they fell asleep on the beach. So they get to that, like, fire pit area where Velma was the first night with the projectors, and Scooby tries to tell Shaggy, he's like, Mary Jane is a man in a mask. And Shaggy's like, no, she's not. You don't know what you're talking about, because Shaggy has a crush. And so then the two of them actually get in an argument. Scooby falls through this trap door, and Shaggy immediately, like, is not mad at Scooby anymore and is like, nope, I have to go get my best friend, and jumps down this pit thing after him. Shaggy's a good friend. I feel like that's all you need to know about Shaggy, is he is a gentleman and a great friend. We love Shaggy Rogers. Big fan. He finds this giant punch bowl thing, and it's filled with these, like, translucent, almost floating heads. And he finds Velma and, like, lets her go, and so she, like, floats back to her body. I don't even want to say floats, like, shoots back to her body. These things go fast, and so they're supposed to be, like, protoplasm. I think of just, like, your soul kind of thing. So he finds Velma, lets her go, finds Fred, lets her go. Kind of pretty cool CGI, I feel like, for the time. I feel like this movie holds up pretty well. Since it's been so long since it came out and, like, CGI's developed so much. I'd love to see what they would do with, like, a live-action Scooby-Doo today. Velma gets back to her body, and the monster comes out, and so, like, she shoots back in, and then, like, the monster comes out of her, those, like, giant, hairless cat-looking things, and burns up in the sun. Those things do not do well in the sun. Velma goes to find Daphne and gets her protoplasm back too, or so we think. But we soon realize that Fred went into Daphne's body. It wasn't Daphne's soul, it was Fred's. And this also means that Daphne goes into Fred's body. And Fred's being really creepy in Daphne's body, but the whole scene's hilarious to see, like, Freddie Prinze Jr. act as Daphne and Sarah Michelle Gellar act as Fred in the other person's body. Absolutely great. Hilarious scene. Shaggy finds the Damonitis, and they all kind of end up meeting up in the woods. They're able to find each other, and they're all changing bodies until everyone is set right. This is when I think that when that kiss scene was supposed to take place. But the actors do a great job of acting like the other characters throughout this. It's great. Once everyone's back, and they go back to the beach, and they see that voodoo guy that Daphne met. And he says that he knows that he has a feeling that they're going to perform the Darkopolis ritual. So, like, dark and apocalypse. Darkopolis. That's a hard word. Darkopolis ritual. Velma says that in order to do that, they need a pure soul. She was reading about that kind of on the Damonitis, that's what's going on. And they think that the pure soul is Scooby. And so it all leads back to Emil Mondavarius, because that's the person who invited them there. So that would make the most sense that he's the bad guy. And he tells Scooby that Shaggy's a bad friend, and he's like, he didn't even listen to you when you tried to warn him about that terrible girl. And Scooby's like, yeah, he didn't, he just got mad. And so then Emil's like, well, I would love for you to be my sacrifice. And Scooby doesn't know what that means. He's a dog. He doesn't know what a sacrifice is. He thinks that that's like an honor. And so he says, yeah, okay. Fred, while they're on the beach, gives the gang a little pep talk, and they decide that they're going to go try and save Scooby. And Shaggy originally is the one kind of leading this. He's like, I don't know what you guys are doing, but that's my best friend, and I'm going to go get him. And Fred's like, no, I think we should all go. Like, let's do it. So they decide to go save Scooby. They have a whole plan, and we see, like, a little montage of them putting everything together. So basically, where this protoplasm head thing is kind of underground, and so they are planning to take the cool disco ball and string it up and then open this, like, skylight thing that will go and shine off the disco ball, and then basically they'll let all of the souls out, so then the sun comes in, destroys all the monsters, and people get their bodies back. So great plan. Shaggy steals a costume from one of the actual workers and tries to get to Scooby. And he says he's going to... When Shaggy finally gets to Scooby, Scooby's like, well, I'm going to be a sacrifice. And Shaggy's like, you don't even know what that means. Like, that's not a good thing, my guy. Shaggy explains what it means, but Scooby realizes too late, and the ritual starts. And so Emil puts the Damonitis, like, in his chest. Think like Iron Man placement almost. Like, it just, like, sets it there. And he says that he's going to absorb the energy from all of the souls that he's taken, and then he's also going to absorb Scooby's energy, which will give him absolute power. So Shaggy jumps and is able to knock Emil down and get Scooby's soul back. Because basically, like, the Damonitis in his chest, like, takes it out. And so Scooby loses his soul for a good little bit of time. Fred and Velma learn, you know, after Shaggy knocks him down on accident, Fred and Velma learn that Emil's actually a robot. And then we further realize that Scrappy-Doo was actually the one controlling him from the inside the entire time. But Scrappy was able to absorb enough energy from the protoplasm heads that he had with the punch bowl that were already kind of being absorbed, that he, like, is gonna have enough energy that he'll just take Scooby's no matter what. And it's not, like, he's like, that's fine. And so he starts turning into this giant monster thing. Daphne ends up having to climb outside to open the, like, skylight door that I was talking about in the roof to let the light in. And she has to fight this, like, masked wrestler guy who's been kind of slowly around the movie. He was one of the henchmen. Like, the theme song plays during the scene. It's a really great fight montage because Daphne is just kicking ass the whole time. Scrappy's trying to get to Scooby, and Fred and Velma are trying to tip over the bowl and save everyone. And Daphne just, she's so great in the scene. I love seeing her be a badass. It reminds me very much of the, like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer type stuff. And I just really like Sarah Michelle Gellar. But MJ actually knocks Shaggy out and hands over Scooby-Doo. And Scooby's like, I fucking told you so. That she was not a good person. Daphne is able to kick the wrestler guy through the skylight thing to let light in. Because basically there's these, like, think of like blinds almost. So she goes up there and she's trying to open the blinds, but he's trying to stop her. And so she just kicks him through the whole window. And she's like, well. And he lands perfectly and ends up tipping the bowl over as he's, like, falling through this skylight. Daphne's able to pull the rope, release the disco ball, and finishes off all of the monsters. And then Shaggy takes this giant electronic, like, pincer thing, so think of little, like, claws. And that's kind of what that's what Scrappy, I guess, originally. That's what Scrappy used to take Scooby's soul. But Shaggy uses it to pull the Damonitis right off of Scrappy's chest. And so then he kind of deflates like a balloon. Like, all the souls that he absorbed fly out. And people are then, you know, getting, the other people are getting their souls back. And Scrappy is deflating and now is not as powerful. Everyone's saved. It's super great. Fred and Daphne kiss. Shaggy finds the real Emil Mondavarius. Velma's flirty with that guy that she was talking to at the bar. Shaggy and Scooby reunite, and MJ shows up and thanks them for saving her, specifically Scooby. And you're like, okay, like, that's cute, whatever. They all go outside, and at this point, of course, all the news agents show up because they're like, oh my gosh, what happened? What's going on? And Fred gives Velma the chance to shine. And he's like, you know, I think Velma should take this one. And so she walks through what they did, what happened, all of that stuff, and Scrappy-Doo is arrested, and Mystery Inc. is back together. And that's pretty much the end of Scooby-Doo, the live-action thing. There's a little clip at the end right after this where Shaggy and Scooby are finally taking advantage of their all-you-can-eat that they were promised, and they're eating these hot peppers, and it's a whole little comedy gag at the very end of them eating the hot peppers and then being affected by them. But I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I know it was a little bit lighthearted, a little bit fun, something kind of different for April Fools. Super excited to be in April. This is my birthday month. So for April, we are doing a lot of movies that are my kind of all-time favorites. So we've done Scream already, and next week we're going to do the first Strangers. The original Strangers. I'm super excited. It's one of my favorites. And yeah, can't wait to talk about this one. If you enjoy the podcast, please give us, like, subscribe, rate, review, whatever it's called, on Apple. And if you want to follow the podcast on socials, we're on Twitter and Instagram at mmurdermovies. So that's M as in massacre, murder movies. I hope everyone enjoyed the episode, and I can't wait to talk about The Strangers next week. Stay safe and stay spooky.